Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Each year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to festival custom. After they had completed its days, as they were returning, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Thinking he was in the caravan, they journeyed for a day, and looking for him among his relatives and acquaintances, but not finding him, they returned to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus advanced in wisdom and age and favor before God and man. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ. Thank you.
Today we contemplate 2 pilgrimages in the readings. Well, maybe 3. The first one is the traveling of Elkanah and Anna to Shiloh with their son Samuel. We have the pilgrimage of Joseph and Mary with Jesus to Jerusalem. And then we have the pilgrimage all of us make, and that's in the middle reading. The pilgrimage we have through life as sons and daughters of God. And as the Gospel says, it must apply to all of us. Jesus advanced in wisdom and age and favor before God and man. That's what we're supposed to do. And we do this in the context of family. I think it's pretty important that we see, right after the Feast of Christmas, that we see where Jesus was placed was in a family. He didn't just pop up at the age of 10. Didn't pop up at the age of 33. No, he was put as a child into the midst of a family. In the book of Sirach, we are reminded that the Lord sets a father in honor over his children. A mother's authority he confers over her sons. That is what you see in both of the readings of those who are in pilgrimage. That the parents were the ones in charge. They weren't the kids' best friends. Parents are not that. Parents be parents, see? And what's important in seeing this, I think, is something of the dynamic that needs to go on in a family. And the dynamic is placed very, very clearly in front of us, that they took their children on pilgrimages. Have you been going on pilgrimages? Well, we better get Father Gilbert in here, right? He'll tell us about Compostela, and he'll tell us about walking all the way across Spain. Why? Why do so many thousands of people do that every year? Because they're searching, they're walking, and that pilgrimage is kind of like a symbol of life. They know their goal, but they take different ways of getting there. There are many different pilgrimage roads going through Spain to Compostela. And they know that as a symbol of life, it's something each one of us has to trace out by ourselves. But we're never alone in that. And if you ever talk to Father Gilbert about it, he talks about each night they go to one of the hostels or someplace, and everybody's brothers and sisters. They're all buddies. They're all helping each other as they're going on this journey. I think you see that also in the way Jesus was taken care of by Joseph and Mary. But of course, you say, well, wait a minute. If they were that close, and if they were doing such a good job, how come they lost them for 3 days? Well, that just reminds us that none of us are perfect in that way. I like those ads. You've heard those ads about trying to get foster kids. And there's somebody out there who's going to want to shove your food around on their plate, probably giving you a hard time eating it. But you know those ads. And they're asking us, they're telling us you don't have to be perfect to be a parent. But what you need is a desire to share. What you need is an openness. What you need is basically love. That we care for others. And that's what Jesus was taught in the family with Joseph and Mary. I think he learned good work, like his dad, his foster father. He certainly learned how to pray at the knees of Mary. Because she was one that was close to God too, you know. And that's something that I think is really important in our Christian family life today. Do you go on pilgrimages with your kids? I grew up in a family that did. Yeah. The first Sunday in September after school began, they put all 5 of us in the car. Of course, we were like all 5 kids in the car. We were not always very nice to each other. And they would drag us out to a shrine to Mary called at Holy Hill, Wisconsin, where I grew up. It was outside of Milwaukee, 30 some miles outside of Milwaukee. And there's this church on top of this gigantic hill. That's why they called it Holy Hill. Well, they call it Holy Hill for another reason. There's a lot of braces and things people wore on their legs that they could take off there as they were healed. So it was a place that taught us from the very beginning the importance, the centrality of Jesus in our lives. We were taught by how Mom and Dad prayed. We prayed the rosary a lot together after supper. Not only that, and I've mentioned this before, is my dad. My dad would go to Mass each morning before he went to work. Now, if that doesn't sink in my head, nothing's going to sink in my head. But I saw him. I saw him do that. That's the only way we're going to teach our kids. It's the only way we're going to share with them is by how we live our faith, how we go to Mass on Sunday, and how we bring our kids to religious education, or put them in our school. But we're saying that's important. Whereas my brother Paul said to his 5 kids, he said, you ain't getting any inheritance, but we're giving you the best education we can afford. They put their house in the hock to pay for the kids' education. They're all college graduates, one's a doctor, all kinds of things. And they're all faithful members in their church. But that's what they share with their children. We need to see that. And that's what Joseph and Mary did. They trotted Jesus off at the age of 12. Come on down, we're going down to Jerusalem, as was their custom. And that's what a good observant Jew would do, would be to go to Passover in Jerusalem. There's another thing, that our families teach us that we are not alone, that we are not individuals, they're just individualistic. And I see this individualism coming out a little bit. It frankly bothers me when people of my age say, I don't want to be a burden to my children. Have you heard that? I sure have. I don't want to be a burden to my children. And I know what they do out in Oregon. Some have physician-assisted suicide. I don't want to be a burden. But boy, are they messing something up there. First of all, being a burden is not a matter of choice. No one wants to be a burden. I get that. But we may or are a lot bigger burden, and maybe will be in the future. The person who thinks he can escape being a burden by something like that physician-assisted suicide is putting a worse burden on the family. See, family is about bearing burdens. Think of it. In our families, this is where we support one another. The burden of an unplanned pregnancy, although I think God always has a part in that, but it's not totally unplanned. The burden of a special needs child. I think of my cousin Gary, born with spinal bifida, couldn't walk. Yet as that kid grew up, I saw love in that family which goes beyond anything I ever lived in my life. I saw as his brothers and sisters cared for him. They know what love is. Were friends of mine whose wedding I had back in campus ministry days many years ago, Jim and Joan, wonderful couple. Their oldest child was born while I was teaching summer school out in Omaha. And so I get this phone call late at night. We had our child. And I said, darn it, because I was supposed to be there for it. You did, wonderful, congratulations. She says, well, Ken, no, the child has Cornelia de Lange syndrome, profoundly mentally disabled, could hardly see, could hardly hear. And when I flew home that weekend to be with them, I remember crying with Joni as we looked at that baby. Yet I saw something in Joan which, God, even today, touches me deeply. Because she said, I love, this is my child. And they took care of that child till he was 14 years old, at home. They had other children. Many told them, don't have any other kids. And they said, no, that's not what God wants. They had other children who learned to love, who cared for their little brother. That so many people would call a burden. Yet, that was their child. And a lot of us, we have to look at that too and say an older child that goes off the rails or an older child that doesn't follow what we've tried to share with them. That becomes a burden in many of our families. We need to say, I still love that child. I still reach out to that child. I don't accept what that child does, but I love that child. And that extends to us older folks. When we arrive at our second childhood, the burden again of being totally dependent on others. But family means to bear one another's burden. Jesus was a special child. We get a glimpse of that today in this reading. Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety. We were worried about you, Jesus. And then Jesus went and was obedient to them. And maybe in the extended family, this would be a good point to say this. Father Mike Christopher is in the hospital. He is very, very seriously ill. I can't be stronger on that. And he's still in a coma. And his closest friends, a guy named Father Ed McCarthy, and another one, Richard Trout, have been with him. They are his power of attorney. They are his healthcare advocate. The love I have seen towards Chris is tangible. That's what our family is to be. Your family my family. And I look at my mom and dad, and I look at Jim and Joan, and I look at Father Richard and Father Ed, and I see the same thing. One is not a burden. One is loved. Because that's what our families are truly all about. And so we have to go and look within our own families. We have to bring Christ's wisdom into our families and our prayer life, and how we show Jesus to others, and how we show God's love to others. That this is part of our journey. This is part of our pilgrimage through life. And Origen, one of the early church fathers, commented on today's gospel, and then he said that whoever is looking for Christ must not seek him in a negligent and careless way. We must look for him with anxiety, with great solicitude, as Joseph and Mary looked for Jesus. And when we find him, we find the Word who became one of us and dwelt amongst us. And we experience his love. And we carried all of our burdens to the cross. He shows us what love really is.